Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Vale of Glamorgan Cabinet meeting of the 19th of January, today, 2023. I'm Councillor Liz Burnett and Chair of the meeting as Leader of the Vale of Glamorgan Council and Cabinet Member for Performance and Resources. Can I remind everyone present that the meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and that this recording will be archived for future viewing. So all participants should mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback. And if any participant wishes to speak, they should raise their hand either on screen or using the digital function. The chat function for these meetings should only be used to highlight any technical issues and potentially to attract the attention of the chair or Democratic Services Officer. Moving on to the meeting as a whole, today is likely to be a long meeting as we go through a number of important reports, not least the budget proposals for the coming year. But those will be subject to scrutiny. They'll all be going out for scrutiny as part of the consultation. So hopefully we can go through the broad principles and basic details and have a further conversation in scrutiny. So moving on, I will go to agenda item 1, and that's apologies for absence. I can see that everyone except Councillor Wilkinson is here, unfortunately, who's unwell, but I believe she's on the mend, and we send our best wishes to Margaret. Agenda item 2 is minutes of the meetings, and I'll take both together. That's on the 15th of December 2022 and the 5th of January 2023. Can I take those as a true reflection of the meetings?
Yeah, and I'll second that, Leader.
Thank you. Next, have we got any declarations of interest? Gwyn. I think you're still muted, Gwyn.
That's better. Thank you, brother. Thank you, Leader. It's agenda item 12, fees and charges. I'm a life member of Lantern Major Football Club, but I got dispensation to speak and vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwyn. Anyone else? Before I've also got a declaration of interest, and it's actually the same report. It's the fees and charges agenda item 12, and it's appendix 7. I have lasting power of attorney for an elderly relative who uses the council's telecare system. So I've got dispensation to speak and vote on that. Thank you. So moving on, we have 3 references. Well, in fact, we have 4, but one is later on the agenda. We have 3 references in front of us today. The first one, if I can just turn to the right page, is the draft older persons housing strategy, which went to the Homes and Safe Communities Scrutiny Committee on the 7th of December 2022. It came to us in the 19th. Sorry, we sent it to scrutiny, and it was quite an interesting discussion on this. Is talking about the strategy's aim of older people living independently, and I think it's very valid that when we've talked about the older people's housing strategy, you know, as a cabinet, we've talked about the importance of the right types of housing in the right places to support everybody in our communities. So, you know, and I noticed that Councillor Hanks queried the Penarth extra care facility and retirement village that has recently been approved by the council's planning committee. And so, you know, that is about having older people's housing alongside an existing sheltered housing complex, an existing care home, and building an extra care facility so that people feel confident that they can continue to be independent for as long as they possibly can. There was a query about the ability of families to build or convert accommodation for older relatives within their homes or adjacent land. And I think that there's probably a valid discussion to be had, particularly about multi-generational homes, where people occupy different parts of the same property. It's happened in some areas, and it is quite an interesting concept. So the scrutiny committee recommended that the views of the committee be considered by cabinet before the final strategy is agreed. And so the areas that they specifically wanted to raise was the importance of strategy to consider the impact of dementia on housing older people and the complex needs to support needs and support associated with this. So I think that's a really, really valid point. The importance of keeping the strategy under constant review. Well, yes, it's things change, and we need to make sure it's fit for purpose. The importance of the strategy and action plan to lay out a process for implementing the strategy. Well, yes, so that we've got a forward work plan on that. The council engaged with Welsh Government in order to review their planning policies. Well, we're as Councillor Sivignanan would know, we're reviewing the LDP currently, and part of the conversation there is again about having the right types of housing in the right places for people to support our communities, and that's not only for older people, it's actually for the people who care for older people, and are there places for them to live, and that the council looks to engage with all age groups around this strategy to account for the aspirations of future generations. So yeah, very, very valid. And as it comments on the fear factor for older people, yes, we need to give people certainty that they will be cared for and that there will be suitable places for them to live in the Vale of Glamorgan as they get older. So that will be considered as part of the development of the housing strategy. And so I would move that we note the comments that the scrutiny committee's made. Is everyone happy on that?
Yeah, and I'll formally second that as well.
Great, and everyone's in agreement and no further comments. The agenda item 5 is a reference from the from Governance and Audit Committee, and that's on 12th of December, in relation to the Corporate Risk Register Q2 update. Always interesting discussions in governance and audit and looking through the risks. In effect, they noted the report, but the one thing that they did come up with was, which is their recommendation 2, was that it be recommended to Cabinet that the reframing of the reshaping risk to a financial fragility risk on the register be agreed. And I think the background to that is that historically reshaping has been a bit of a mixture between cost saving and service transformation. And in some ways we need to capture in the current situation the financial fragility risk as we're in such a fluid position. So I think that is a very sensible option, and very happy to agree that and note the rest of the report. So I would move that the reshaping risk or the reshaping risk, I'm getting my phrasing wrong, into a financial fragility risk on the register be agreed.
And I'll second that as well.
Thanks, Brom. Agenda item 6 is a reference from Corporate Performance and Resources, and that's of the 14th of December, and that's when they considered the Public Service Board draft wellbeing plan and scrutiny report, and that there were a couple of queries or discussion points, I think, from that committee. And again, Councillor Hanks was discussing the funding period for the age-friendly Vale officer by Welsh Government, and that the post is funded for the remainder of 2021-22 and plus a further 2 years after that, which is good news. And also that as a result of that comment, further information on age-friendly services would be shared with the committee in due course. There were discussions also about having deeper communication or deeper engagement with the communities. Well, hopefully that's what's also happening as a result of our new champions who seem to be getting out and about and engaging with their respective groups of people. Councillor Johnson raised the issues of the lower super output areas, and they'd been categorised in Eastern Barry, and I think that's being fed back as well, because obviously there are areas LSOAs within other areas of Barry which would be classified as disadvantaged, and then there was also discussion about having clearly defined metrics and benchmarks, etc. And I would totally agree with that. So this is the PSB report. I would suggest that there was also discussion, about whether or not the PSB would be doing a reflections document, and I think we would agree that it's always good to learn from these sorts of initiatives, so we would raise that with the PSB. So the comments raised, we will pass on to the PSB for their consideration, and I think it's for this cabinet to note. So I would therefore move that said we forward it on to PSB and that we note the report for ourselves.
And I'll second that as well.
Agenda item 7 is a housekeeping report. This is our quarterly work programme, October to December 2022 and January to March 2023. It's fairly straightforward. Couple of points to raise in Appendix 1, that's the October to December 2022. There are 2 items that you might want to mention. One is the Project Zero report. Well, that is, hang on, if I can just turn the pages to find the page that I'm talking about. Yeah, it's on page 7, at the bottom of page 7. And the report had been delayed from the October cycle because following that there were other bits and pieces that scrutiny wanted to be built in. That report is now on its way to us. I believe it might even be at the next cabinet, having been to scrutiny committees recently. So as soon as those references are written up, and looking forward, I'm just thinking it's page 21. I think I was told the supporting people report. It actually was. It was delayed to January. It was due to come, but I must be honest with the size of the agenda today. I asked for it to be kept over until the next meeting so that we have an opportunity to have a full discussion on it. But apart from that, the report is fairly self-explanatory. So I therefore, in terms of recommendations, recommend that the updates to the Cabinet quarterly work programme for October to December 2022 attached to Appendix 1 be agreed, and that the quarterly work programme January to March 2023 attached to Appendix 2 be endorsed.
And I'll second that.
Thank you. Another housekeeping report on agenda item 8, and that's the use of the Chief Executive's emergency powers. And as Cabinet would be aware, this is where we take decisions where the decision would not justify holding an extra special meeting of the body, whether that be a scrutiny or a cabinet, etc. And they're pretty straightforward. Quite often it's to be able to accept a grant or to move a previously agreed project on, or those sorts of things. The use of emergency powers is actually laid out in agenda item in paragraph 2, and it goes out at length. One that I would really like to make a comment on is actually 2.1a, and that's the transitional accommodation capital programme at Eagles Well School, Llantwit Major. And that's where the council had an opportunity to access transitional accommodation capital programme funding from Welsh Government in order to provide more appropriate temporary accommodation for Ukrainian refugees whom the council has a statutory duty to rehouse. I'm aware that there's been discussion locally. This is a site that previously was a school site. It's allocated in the local development plan currently as a housing site, but it's not actually ready to be used as a housing site as yet. There are no plans. While we've been discussing it, because there are no plans at the moment, most would not be aware that there have been ongoing discussions with the local health board or with Cardiff Vale Health Board in relation to their strategic assessment of healthcare provision in the Western Vale, and whether or not that would form a good site for such a healthcare provision. I'm aware, well, Councillors Williams and John joined me in a meeting with the Chief Exec of the Health Board to discuss that topic. And more recently, I met for a range of reasons with the chair of the Health Board, and we discussed it again. And I have assurances that within their planning, there will be consideration of that site as part of future health provision in the Western Vale. We will continue to be in discussion on that. But in the interim, before there are plans ready to go ahead, it would appear a kind and positive thing to do, to use that land in what's called a meanwhile use for modular units to house people who aren't able to live in their home country and who are in absolute desperate need at the moment. I know that historically the people of Llantwit have been hugely welcoming to people who have been in such positions, and I'm confident that they will again for this temporary use before a future use for hopefully some form of health provision and hopefully some constructive housing development that fits with local need. But for now, we are moving forward with this development. There are some other areas I'm sure people would like to raise it, but I think Councillor Wilson, you wanted to come in first.
Yeah, thank you very much, Leader. Yeah, there's 2 points I like us to consider as part of this agenda item, and that is item G on Atlantic Trading Estate. And it's a really good news story here. In March 28th last year, 2022, we agreed in principle development of a fleet parking site at Atlantic Trading Estate and subject to sufficient funding. Now, the great thing is we've got that funding available, and therefore I use my powers, emergency powers, to execute the purchase of the land, propose a fleet parking using independent valuation of the land, and including the added purchase of an access road and a green access by right of way. And obviously that's good news, because hopefully that will contribute to our Project Zero by 2030. and that's really good for the environment, and that will reduce the amount of travelling from our site in Wenvo to Atlantic Trading Estate. That's one good news. And the other bit of good news, although it came out with something which was a bit a shame, bit of a disappointment. Obviously, Jehu, this is on item I, Jehu Project Services, as you know, ceased trading. And they took it, and there was an administrator appointed. Now, the good news was that we, in conjunction with a construction management contractor, we've now taken on that business that Jehu was doing. And now the council is doing that in conjunction with them. And that will mean that the project in Hayes Road, Hayes Road, Barry, will hopefully be completed in the next few months, and that's really good news. So I just thought I'd relay those 2 points to you all.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, that is good news about Hayswood Road. I think we were all a bit disappointed with the news on Jehu, but that is really good news. I look forward to going to visit. Councillor Brooks, you were next.
Okay, thank you, Liz. Yeah, I just wanted to update Cabinet on item F under there, which is the Barry Regeneration Partnership Project Fund, and this is in relation to the former toilet block hoarding scheme over on the island. It's just to update people, update everyone that officers are actually in quite some positive discussion with the developers at the moment. So I'm actually looking quite hopeful, and I say there are some positive steps forward with that. So I just thought it'd be worth highlighting that.
Thank you. That would be good news. Right, and Councillor John Gwynn, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Leader, very much. Thank you for your support at Eagleswell site. We've had a number of meetings with the Health Board, and as you I'm pleased to hear from you today that the chairman of the Health Board is quite positive. And quite simply, Lantern Major needs better health facilities. And when the Health Board brought about their reshaping of clinical services, we were the first to apply and come to Lantern Major in the Western Vale, because the catchment is huge. But I would thank you for your support on that, and also my surprise and disappointment with the number of people that have really got very upset about our looking after the Ukrainian refugees there on a temporary basis. As we know, we don't know how long it's going to go on for. Hopefully, this absolutely awful war will end soon. But we have certainly anticipated that we will be looking after the Ukrainians on this site for at least the next 2 years. And quite simply, I'm sure that the majority of people in Lantern Major will welcome them with open arms. The atrocities of war, I think none of us have experienced. And what these people have suffered is absolutely enormous. And every day they are very upset with the amount of people passing away, being killed in action or killed in their own homes. And quite honestly, I think you have to be there to understand it. However, I will be the first to welcome them to Eagleswell Road when they arrive. And I hope that the people on Lantern Major will join me in this, because we desperately need to look after our comrades from Ukraine. They have suffered huge. And I thank you, Leader, and the Cabinet today for taking decisive action. And hopefully, I'm sure the Housing Department, we're all working together for the same objection. And, quite honestly, these objectives will be met. Thank you.
Super, thank you, Gwyn. So it's taken quite a long time for what is normally a very basic report, but worthwhile. It's the recommendation before us is that the use of the Chief Executive's emergency powers be noted.
All right, I'll formally second that, just for the record then.
Thank you. So getting on to the main agenda items of the day. Agenda item 9 is the capital monitoring programme. Capital monitoring for the period 1st of April to 30th of November. So in effect, the first half of this financial year. The report is very detailed and it gives an update on the progress of the capital programme between, as I said, April and November. At the time of the report was writing, the approved programme totaled 90.4 million. And that was included some stuff that was slipped forwards from other years. If all the requests in this report to amend the capital programme are approved, the revised forecast outturn is projected to be 88.2 million, so a slight reduction. And the spend to the end of November so far is 30.1 million. I think, as we've discussed previously, the capital programme is currently subject to significant, I think that's an understatement, inflationary pressures due to the current economic climate. And this is leading to more negotiating with contractors, retendering processes and project re-engineering. And this is resulting in schemes start dates being delayed. And I think that's why we were so pleased about the outcome for the Hazelwood Road site, where we were able to take on that development and work with subcontractors, because we've actually avoided having to retender and all the costs associated with that. But there are still issues with long lead times on the delivery of materials, especially in relation to the purchase of vehicles and also some building materials. Schemes being closely monitored throughout the year to identify overspends and slippages, and a part of this report is that slippage of 2.4 million has been requested. So we're actually getting to about that time of year where we know some schemes we know are not going to be completed or undertaken before the end of March. So that's where we can start to plan in terms of where we go. Appendix 1 details financial progress in the capital programme as of November by scheme, and Appendix 2 is summarised over the directorates and sets out the approved budget of the final proposals report that was approved in February 2022. It then goes on to detail movements in year, including slippages and additions to demonstrate the journey to the revised forecast outturn in 2022-23. The report also details recent delegated authority requests that have been approved, notes the use of emergency powers detailed to Appendix 1 to the report. There's a new section in the report which is a progress update on capital programmes, and the table shows the percentage of schemes completed, in progress and on target for completion. And I think that's a really useful table. It's promising to note that all directorates have either completed or are on target to complete over 80% of the current schemes on the programme. That's actually quite a feat in the current environment. Further paragraphs have been included highlighting progress on significant capital schemes this year, and some of those, if we just sort of mention them, obviously you've got the new builds on the housing improvement programme, and that would include the one we just mentioned, Hazelwood Road. There's also St Cyrus Road and Hayes Road Lane. I think that's called Lonavelling Wint, I think, if I've got the name right. I've been to visit it and it's gorgeous. Then you've got the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme, and considerable progress has been made to date. I mean, obviously with the 5 schools now operational, that's sort of St David's, Church in Wales Primary, South Point Primary, Whitmore High School, Ysgol Morgannwg and Pencoitra High School. 4 are now under construction and progressing well. Cowbridge Primary, the Centre for Learning and Wellbeing, Barry Waterfront and St Nicholas. And I've been to I've been to all of those except St Nicholas, so I'm looking forward to going to visit that before too long. An outline planning application has been submitted for the Yscola Derry scheme. That was submitted in late 2022, and hopefully that will be determined before too long, particularly for any of us that are glued to television for the documentary on Yscola Derry, which is I don't think many of us are getting through without becoming tear stained. But other things that are coming forward is the new waste for transfer station and reuse shop. I think a lot of us who like upcycling things are looking forward to that. The new waste transfer station phase 1 is mainly complete, and phase 2 is now underway, with the expectation that the site will start to receive recycling and waste from March 2023. I'm sure Mark will talk more about that in the waste and recycling report. Construction of the reuse shop is complete. That's really exciting, and expected to be operational by spring 2023. The report requests to make some amendments to the current capital programme, and some of the larger requests include the carry forward of 993,000 into the 2023-24 capital programme in relation to free school meals. That's part of the work to include provision of free school meals to all primary age children, and we need to do additional work such as providing demountable kitchen and dining facilities to some of our schools. But we're all planned and we've got things organised, and we are virtually ready to go on that as soon as the sort of green button gets pressed. There's also the a carry forward of 300,000 for the BSC2 scheme, as there was a few issues with sustainable drainage prior to tendering. So that's a brief run through of the capital monitoring scheme, and the recommendations are a bit huge and go through nearly 2 pages. So I'm going to praise you those. If I say that, go through the main recommendations. Firstly, it's that Cabinet's recommended to note the progress made on delivering the 2022-23 capital programme. Cabinet's recommended to note the use of delegated authority as set out in the report. Cabinet's recommended to note the use of emergency powers as detailed in the attached appendix. And Cabinet is recommended to approve the following changes to the 2022-23 and future years capital programme as laid out below. And so the various changes continue down to the bottom of page 2, and also about most of the way down page 3. I think we've all got copies of that in front of us anyway, and I would so move.
I'd like to say something, if possible, Leader.
Of course you can, Mark.
Thank you very much. Thank you for highlighting the waste transfer station and the reuse shop. Obviously, it's coming up later on the agenda, so I won't go into detail, but I am delighted. I've been on the site a couple of times. I'm delighted with the progress being made there, and it looks absolutely super. And I'm really looking forward to see it working, hopefully in March this year. And I know it will start on the trial basis, tying out a few things, obviously, and then hopefully on full stream later on. And there's a couple other things as well. The other positive thing I want to talk about is on 2.34 on page 11, and that's to do with Coulterville multi-user games area. Now, that's something that I visited along with officers. It's a games area that needs to be significantly developed. It's been a bit dilapidated state. I had a good look around, and I really pushed for the money. And what was also delighted, it was that the youth in Penarth in particular wrote a fantastic report on it, recommended that we make some progress on this, and I was very, very pleased. When it came to the town council, as you know, I'm also a town councillor, to do a presentation on it, and I was delighted to give them that good news that we've allocated money for that. So hopefully in the next financial year, that should be all pretty much open, and I'm looking forward to opening that. And the other news is on 2.26, Clanmice construction. Although unfortunately, because of construction costs and other issues, the benefit cost ratio was what we call below 1. So we couldn't go forward with Welsh Government on that. But what we're going to be doing, we're going to be doing a detailed economic appraisal on that. And therefore, we've made the decision to carry forward the £540,000 in a capital programme for next financial year 23-24. I'm very keen for this project to occur. I think it's very much needed in that community, and obviously we want to try and reduce the impact upon flooding and our many of the communities in the Vale Glamorgan. So thank you.
Super, thank you, Mark. So do I recall, Bronwyn, did you second this report?
No, I did not. I'll second the report. Thank you.
Great. And we're all in agreement. Excellent. Get myself organised. The next one, I'd better tick this off or I'll end up doing the wrong report. Next one, agenda item 10, and that's the revenue monitoring for the period, again, April, 1st of April to 30th of November, the first 6 months of the year. And this report includes a revised budget, and it reflects some transfers for insurance and ICT licenses. There are a number of environments requested as part of this revised budget, from policy to resources for Project Zero staff costs. And some reallocation of the residual carbon allowances budget, and budget transfers are also requested within the Place Directorate to reflect some restructuring. Generally, in the monitoring, we continue to see pressures in respect of school transport, children's services, payments for HGV drivers, and payments to Parkwood, that's for our leisure services. Obviously, we've still got specific pressures in terms of additional pay pressures, because we've had fixed rate energy contracts. We've seen very little impact from energy pressures in year, but as we will see in the budget papers, we then project a significant increase in costs for the 2023-24 budget in this area. There's a reduced need from services for a contribution from the policy underspend to offset additional pay costs, and this is due to one-off underspends in areas such as vacant posts. So where a post has been vacant, that's been used to manage any potential overspend. The school transport pressure, and interestingly, I was mentioning this when I was giving evidence in the Senate committee this morning. The school transport pressure currently not met within the transport service is £601,000. I mean, that is absolutely phenomenal, and that is the pressures that we are facing in trying to transport our children and young people back and forth to school. At the moment, we can meet that through the policy underspend, so it doesn't come up as something that we've got to deal with at the moment. We're awarding cost pressures to this area as part of the draft budget, so again we'll speak about that later. There will be a one-off underspend in adult services of 2 million due to a change in accounting approach for deferred income, and that's been recommended to us as a way forward by Audit Wales. And as a result of that, I mean, there's an explanation of that, the sort of nuances of that in the report. But as a result of that, although there are pressures against residential homes and children's services, this one-off £2 million adjustment can offset those costs, and it will also enable the service to make a contribution to reserves to support us in the future. There are overspends in Environment and Housing Directorate, which are associated with additional costs around HGV drivers and leisure costs. That will be funded from the Neighbourhood Services Reserve. And And also, as the Oracle Fusion system wasn't able to go live as planned, it's now expected to go live on the 1st of April 2023. There are additional costs associated with the delayed implementation. These are currently being quantified, but it's expected that they can be also met from the policy underspend. The policy underspend is projected to be 2.75 million, and that's made up of 2 million capital financing, and that's in effect because the council is borrowing from itself internally, so not having to pay costs externally for borrowing. So there's a saving on that. £250,000 from the council tax reduction scheme in terms of there not being as much take up, and £500,000 investment income. So that's how that's been made up. And after use of the policy underspend for additional pay awards across council services, and that was of £803,000, the previously agreed Oracle contribution of £460,000, there'll be a remaining balance of 1.487 million available for school transport and additional Oracle costs, and so that will be covered in future monitoring reports as we go forward. The recommendations for this report going forward is that the position with regard to the authority's 2022-23 budget revenue budget be noted, that members note the arrangements to offset the projected overspends in 2022-23 as set out in the report, and finally that members approve the amended revenue budget for 2022-23 as set out in Appendix 1, and I'd move.
And I'll second those, Leader.
Thank you. Eddie, your hand's up.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I just wanted to point out that, those figures that we've got on there, they're quite detailed, aren't they? And they show just transparent on where we are with the council. But I'd just like to add that that's probably been a challenge in the last few months, particularly as we're going through this budget setting process. But also, thanks to the officers for putting us in this position, and even within the social services, changing the way we look at our deferred payments. That was quite enlightening to me. But there we go. So I appreciate the report. Thank you.
Thank you. And everybody had indicated their support, so we can move on to the next report, which is agenda item 11, and that's the budget 2023-24 for consultation, and it's also a further medium-term financial plan update. This is quite a complex report, and while I will give headlines, it will still be quite detailed. This report is going to be discussed at every scrutiny committee over next month. It will be subject to consultation. There will be much discussion. These are our proposals as they are, and it will ultimately come to full council after coming back to Cabinet to be decided in March. We've had discussions previously. I know when we started the budget planning process back at the end of last summer, and every time we looked at the figures, they looked worse. We got to a position where the gap between the money we had and the money we needed was £38 million. And I did a quick ready reckoner the other day on that. If we'd met that £38 million from council tax, that would have been a 45% increase in council tax. Well, that's not possible. So we had the question of where do we go and how do we manage this? How do we continue to deliver the services that so many of our residents rely on? So this report builds on the strategy report that gave that £38 million gap that was approved in October, and it brings forward our budget proposals to discuss with our residents. There is a much improved position. I'm really pleased to say there is a much improved position over that 38 billion, but there's still a sizable gap, and that sizable gap is £9.3 million still. The budget settlement that we were notified of on the 14th of December is far more generous than anticipated. But it doesn't cover everything. There's 227 million is directed to local government, which gives an overall settlement of 7.9% across Wales, as from the Welsh Government. And due to demographic factors, that's i.e., our demographic changes, the Vale has received the third highest allocation in Wales, and that's 8.9%. So the range in terms of local authorities goes between 5.4% and 9.3%. In terms of going forward and in terms of meeting our sort of objectives and what we need to deliver for residents, previously we had modelled our assumptions on a council tax of 3.9%. But in this report, we are proposing that the council tax increase is 4.99%, that we won't be able to deliver a balanced budget on what we'd previously modelled. But I said it's a lot better than the 45%. Total funding is up 20.9 million. So pressures have now been thoroughly reviewed and they stand at 30.6 million. So, that's going down from the 38. So what we've had to do is we've had to pare back investments and the timing of them to bring the pressures in the budget to reassess the pressures in the budget. There are some areas of the budget that we can't. There's nothing we can do about. In terms of pay and energy pressures, in fact, the sort of inflation pressures that the council has to deal with, which was 21 million, there is nothing you can do. They are things that we have to pay. So we had to find ways of doing that. So the 9.3 million that's still outstanding is being met through a few different ways. 3.2 million is a one-off use of reserves, and the reason, interestingly, I was having a discussion earlier today about the use of reserves, and quite often every year we're told, use the reserves, and reserves can only be used in specific ways, otherwise they're just gone, and you can never use them again. So the way in which we're using reserves is firstly, in terms of energy, where it's currently predicted that energy prices will be a spike. We are using our reserves to smooth off that spike, to reduce the pressures in that spike, as it's seen as a one-off area. We're also using our reserves in a sort of an invest to save perspective, where, say, for example, in terms of homelessness pressures, that in terms of spending money to find accommodation for people, it not only improves their quality of life, but it also means that we reduce the long-term costs of homelessness that any local authority faces. In order to do this, as we said previously, the council's reserves have been thoroughly reviewed, and they are now streamlined and aligned with the council's current risks. So we're able to use that amount of money without impacting on the reserves and what they're supposed to be there for. we'll be going for 6.1 million of savings efficiencies, and that's going to be mainly through service review and income generation. And although we are passporting increases onto schools, they will share the load, and there will be a £2 million efficiency requirement for schools, which will be determined at an individual school level. Our strategy has always been to protect the most vulnerable in our communities, and this can be seen through the £8.4 million investment in social services. And the proposed budget also goes a long way to meeting all of the pressures on our schools, so that actually, although we're talking about sharing efficiency savings, there's a 9.8 million for schools to cover pay, energy and demographic pressures, before a 0.7 million one-off use of reserves to cover energy costs, and the 2 million efficiency requirement. As I mentioned at the start, these proposals will now go out to public consultation and scrutiny before the final budget comes before Council in March. So following this meeting, the consultation will be launched. I would really ask everyone to get involved in that consultation, to give your thoughts and your views. I've already received a number of letters and I will respond to each personally. It might take me a few days though, if you'd give me a couple of days grace on that. And then it will come back after its discussion in scrutiny, where you can register as a speaker at scrutiny if you so wish as well. It will come back to Cabinet in March. Every meeting will be available on the internet, either to watch live or to watch subsequently. So we hope that as many people as possible can get involved in this process. Before moving the recommendations, I'd like to draw your attention to one very minor error in Appendix C, and it's at the bottom of the second page. If I can just get there to make sure that I'm totally correct. And it is where it's talking about neighbourhood and housing, budget adjustment, pre-tenancy advisor, and VAT's budget. In the final column, it's showing a 6 in the total column, not 26 as it should be. It doesn't impact on tables in the main body of the report, but it needs to be correct. So for subsequent meetings, a replacement Appendix C will be provided. So if I can just make sure that that's amended. So the recommendations before us are that Cabinet notes. Sorry, I'm in the wrong. Do 11. That's it. Yep. Sorry. The recommendations that Cabinet notes the updated financial position. Recommendation 2, I need to make an alteration to that as well. That Cabinet approves the revised funding and spend assumptions and saving proposals, and this refers this report and all appendices to, and it should say to all scrutiny committees, because this will go to every single scrutiny committee. It will then be referred from them to the lead scrutiny committee, corporate performance and resources, with any recommendations being referred back to Cabinet on the 27th of February 2023. 3, that Cabinet approves the realigned reserves to match the risks the Council now faces. 4, that Cabinet approves the savings proposals to be published for consultation with Vale of Glamorgan residents and other groups impacted by the Council's budget. And finally, that Cabinet is recommended to note the early work necessary to ensure all savings are delivered in full for 2023. I would actually like to add a 6th recommendation. I really would like to thank the officers that have been involved in developing this budget. As I said, it's been going on since late summer. The finance team have been absolutely superb, but while they deserve the main praise for this, I would also say that there has been a collegiate and collaborative approach from all members of the strategic leadership team who have worked together. There has been no silo thinking. People have been looking at how we as a council can move forward and manage the scale of deficit we have, and my heartfelt thanks to them for their work on this to get us to this position, and I'd so move.
And I'll second those recommendations, Leader.
Thank you, Bronwyn. And Gwyn, you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Leader, very much. Well, nobody likes paying council tax, but quite honestly, when we go back to last autumn, we think back to the early days where we were going with the dreadful situation in the country of high inflation, huge debts, and the fact that the impact on that made to us as a council of 38 million hole in the budget. Quite honestly, it looked a really dire situation. And I must thank the officers, the strategic leadership team, everyone who's played a part in this, because I remember you coming into meetings and discussing these things, and quite honestly, it was a really sad situation every meeting. And quite honestly, the work that you've all done has got to be admired. To come forward with a budget like we have of 4.9 is absolutely incredible. I'm sure that we'll be one of the lowest councils in Wales with the figure. Yes, we have had a better settlement from the Welsh government, but at the same time, it's the arrangements that we've made within the council and addressing these huge problems that has brought us to this. And the members of Llantwit First are 100% in support of this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwyn. Yes, it's as we were discussing, I said, with the Senedd Finance Committee this morning, we went through a period last autumn where the sands were shifting so fast. We had no idea of how much money, where it was coming from, or how it would change, as it did. And I'm really pleased that we're in this position. So yes, pleased to be bringing this to council ultimately, but be interesting to hear people's views on it. So moving on to agenda item 12, I think this is another report that I'll be very keen to hear people's views on. And as we discussed in the previous report, this very much links in with the previous report. This is the report for the Vale of Glamorgan Council on proposed fees and charges for 2023-24. And it's something that we do every year. We review fees and charges, and we normally look to reflect inflation. And I think that that's what we've done on the whole this year as well. But I think that when we were discussing the revenue budget, the budget for next year, it became apparent how important income generation, and one part of that is fees and charges, is in us delivering that balanced budget. So we have to look at it very carefully. But I think within that, we've applied some basic principles. We've applied some basic principles of fairness. We've applied some basic principles of, if we're looking at non-statutory services, there is a choice really between either not delivering them if they are costing us money, or delivering them and working towards them being cost neutral, so that they actually don't cost the council money. Now, we haven't got there with a lot of the services, but we need to work towards that, and I think that that's where we're looking. So This report is actually a sort of a consolidated report, and if you look at the various appendices, it outlines the proposals for increased fees for 2023 to 24, and that's it across neighbourhood services, resources, place, learning and skills, and social services. And the as I mentioned, the medium-term financial plan did mention income generation as one of the strands to achieving a balanced budget. So in many ways, if it is decided that any of these charges which form part of that balanced budget aren't acceptable, then we have to find another way of doing it. And you know, that in effect is a discussion before us for the future. It should only be in areas where a policy decision is made and there is a clear case for the interventional impact of a service that we should consider lower fees. So if something is really important for the corporate plan, for supporting certain groups within our communities or something that's previously been agreed, then there is an argument for saying, well, actually, this service should not be at full cost recovery. But we have to look at that. Obviously, inflation is a key factor that's influenced our cost pressures, and so we've taken a rate of between 5 and 10% at the moment in terms of increases going forward. We've as part of our preparation, we've benchmarked services against other local authorities and against other types of services that are available to make sure that they're comparable. And as I said, the majority of the proposed fees are somewhere between 5 and 11%. Sometimes they've been sort of rounded up to the nearest 5 or 10p. To make things easier, we've asked for some delegations within this report, and so there's a delegation within neighbourhood services to amend prices. There's a delegation in respect of registrar's charges to enable prices to be set for future years. The telecare pricing strategy is set out in the report, but actually is subject to a further review, and therefore a delegation to amend that has also been requested. Just trying to find something. I've got no doubt that some cabinet members will mention some areas. There are some that are available, and I suppose a case in point is that just something that would be relevant to Penarth. There is a mention on paragraph 2.21, the docking of Waverley and Balmoral at Penarth Pier, that it is proposed that these costs are increased at the rate of inflation because it actually takes 2 members of staff to support any docking at the pier in Penarth. Now, it hasn't operated for the last couple of years, and the last time we had conversations with the organisations, we said, well, when you are ready to operate, come and talk to us, because we have got the availability to be flexible if organisations are talking to us openly. I also wanted to specifically mention there will be a separate report coming talking about car parking, because there are various strategic aims within our approach to car parking. But I wanted to talk about, I'm just looking, paragraph 2.29 of this report in Appendix 1B. That's talking about car parking. We are looking in terms of car parks. Currently in the report, it talks about where we have a 1 hour charge and 6 hour charge. taking it to the £1 to £1.10p and the £6 to £6.50 with the sort of evening reduction. But I think what I will say there is, and if you look at 2.29, it is our intention to move our coastal car parks to tiered charges. We feel that that would be a positive step. It will be, there is a need. It was to go alongside the introduction of automatic number plate recognition within the car parks, but it might be that we're not able to get that in before we need the changes to happen. So we are looking at that. There will be the need for traffic regulation orders in that. We think that if there are tiered parking, actually it might take the pressure off people using residence areas to park, because they can stop for a cup of coffee and just pay a couple of pounds. And we would intend to move forward on this during 2023-24. And so I wanted to make that public for people, that is the intention of this administration, to make car parking charges variable in those areas. But as I said, it's all laid out. I am sure we will have very detailed discussions in scrutiny committees over the next month, and we'll have conversations elsewhere. I was just about to move to recommendations. Do you want to come in beforehand, Bronwyn?
No, I'll speak once you've moved the recommendations, Leader. That's fine.
Super, thanks. So recommendations, we've actually got 6, but I will read them out. The recommendations: 1, that Cabinet approves the proposals for amendments to fees and charges and associated policy and process changes as set out in this report and the associated appendices. 2, that Cabinet refers this report to all scrutiny committees for comment, and that these comments are referred to Corporate Performance and Resources as the lead scrutiny committee. 3, that in pursuance of recommendation 2, Cabinet requests the Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee refers comments back to Cabinet for consideration as part of the final fees and charges setting at the meeting on the 27th of February 2023. 4, that delegated authority is given to the Director of Environment, Housing Services, in consultation with the Head of Finance / Section 151 officer and the relevant Cabinet member, to agree and set any new charges or amend the values of existing charges for the Directorate that may arise during the course of the financial year of 2023-24. 5, that delegated authority be granted to set registrar's fees to the operational manager of Democratic Services as the proper officer for the Council's registration service, in consultation with the Director of Corporate Resources, Head of Finance / Section 151 officer, and the Cabinet member for Performance and Resources. And 6, that delegated authority be granted to Director of Social Services in consultation with the Head of Finance / Section 151 officer and the relevant Cabinet member, to agree and set any new charges or amend the values of existing charges for the telecare service following the review that is currently being undertaken. I'd move, but I'd hand over to Bronwyn.
Thank you, Leader. I will second those recommendations formally. And it's just to add that I fully endorse the review around the coastal car park charges. I know we have been investigating and trying to implement the ANPR system, which I also fully support. But in the interim time, I do think that to move to a tiered system is the right and proper thing to do. And I think it will help support our businesses, our residents, and also then about the residential parking as well. So I think this is the right time to do that, and I fully endorse that recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. I think actually it's worth saying that we still will have the season tickets, which are absolutely super because they work out at about £1 a week, and you can then park for as long as you want, as often as you want, which is a godsend if you if you just want to pop down there off and on, particularly if you're local and you haven't got to mess around with parking. But that those work as well in the country parks. So I know that some of the cold water swimmers, can't remember what they're called, but
The Watch
use them
Tower
to.
Raiders.
That's
raiding-
right. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. People have contacted me and found them very, very useful. So super. We shall move on from there without anyone else wanting to speak. Agenda item 13. We're looking at the draft capital programme proposals 2023-24 to 2027-28. So we actually are looking longer term on these, although future years are more indicative. And this report sets out, as I said, the council's proposed draft capital programme going forward, and on in December, when Welsh Government announced a settlement, the provisional capital funding settlement, the amount awarded to the council was 6.997 million. That was made up of a 3.545 million grant and 3.452 million of supported borrowing. That's actually an increase of 1.168 million from the 2022-23 general capital funding of 5.829 million. Welsh Government have also advised us that 20 million capital across Wales is being provided to enable authorities to respond to the joint priority of carbonisation. So that is very welcome. The council's awaiting further information from Welsh Government in relation to that, to find out exactly what it means for us as a council. Welsh Government have confirmed that general capital funding will remain at the same level for 2024-25, but we don't have any figures further forward than that. The summary of the 5-year capital programme and how it's funded is given in the report, and the total value of capital schemes over the next 5 years is a pretty staggering £265 million. This includes £40 million for Band B Sustainable Communities for Learning programme, and 167 million for the Housing Improvement Programme. The funding table also highlights the borrowing required to implement the programme, and that's 116 million, of which is in relation to the Housing Improvement Programme. So we heard a little bit about that when we discussed the housing revenue account at the last cabinet. The detailed programme can be found in Appendix 1. Any slippage that's been requested as part of the November 2022 Capital Monitoring Report, which is on the same agenda as this report, obviously earlier we discussed, has been included in Appendix 1. The schemes detailed in the appendix are detailed in the appendix, sorry, but for 2023-24, as an overview, they include an additional £700,000 for resurfacing, £250,000 for social services in Invest to Save schemes, and that's actually going to be 1.5 million over a 3-year period, and that's about developing our own provision to provide better quality of life for our residents, and at the same time likely save revenue costs going forward. 230,000 for drainage repairs and underpinning works to Cartref Porthkerry residential home. £275,000 for the safeguarding and security of external school boundaries. So we'll be looking at that and making any changes there. Cladding works at Ysgol Bro Morgannwg will be £415,000. £290,000 for health and safety priority items identified in school condition surveys. £85,000 match funding for the Empty Home Scheme grant. So this is where we are looking to bring as many empty homes back into beneficial use, and we will provide owners of empty properties. We'll work with them to bring those back into use, and £500,000 for decarbonisation schemes, and that is also about £1.5 million over the 5-year period. So very similar to the revenue report that I've just taken. This scrutiny committees will be asked to review the draft capital programme and make any comments, and that will come back to us for discussion on 27th of February before going to full council in March. When we get the feedback from all those discussions, managers will be asked to revisit the recommended schemes contained in the draft final proposals prior to presentation to Cabinet and Council to confirm final costs and spend profiles. The public consultation will run from the 20th of January to 15th of February. And again, I would ask anyone who is able to contribute to that consultation. It's always quite disappointing when obviously it's something that people feel very strongly about, but the numbers don't reflect that. So in the same way, the revenue budget, if you can either go online and contribute, register to speak at a scrutiny, or just email one of us if it's relevant, or your local councillor, and make your views heard. So the recommendations that we have on this are that Cabinet is recommended to review the draft capital proposals for 2023-24 to 2027-28 and submit for consultation with all of the scrutiny committees. That Cabinet is recommended to approve that any recommendations of scrutiny committees are passed to Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee as the lead scrutiny committee in order for their views to be forwarded to Cabinet. So that will all be collated and Corporate Performance and Resources will forward them on to us. The Cabinet is recommended to approve the reprofiling of the Band B Penarth cluster, that's the review of primary provision, to include the Cosmeston scheme as detailed in paragraph 2.31 in the report. For that, Cabinet is recommended to approve the reprofiling of the changing rooms and auxiliary facilities and a replacement boxing club at the Buttrells playing field scheme as detailed in paragraph 2.32 of this report. I think that'll be very welcome. And that Cabinet is recommended to approve the reprofiling of the housing improvement programme for the years 2023-24 to 2027-28 as shown in paragraph 2.39 of this report, and I'd move.
And I'll second those, Leader.
Thank you, Bronwyn. And Gwyn's got his thumb up as well. We're all in agreement. And Mark, thank you. And then agenda item 14 is the Q2 performance of the annual delivery plan monitoring report. This plan comes to us. It's actually already been to all of the scrutiny committees for comment. And it's our progress from the 1st of April 2022 through to the 30th of September 2022. So in effect, that's after 2 quarters. Pleased to say that all 4 corporate plan wellbeing objectives were given a green performance status at Q2. 93%, and that's what 353 out of 380 planned activities outlined in our annual delivery plan have been given a green performance status, and that means that only 2% of planned activities were amber and 5% were red. Of the 128 performance measures aligned to our corporate plan wellbeing objectives, data reported for 27 measures where performance status was applicable. 59% of measures were green, 11% amber, and 30% red. A performance status wasn't applicable for 101 measures, with 21 of those, 22 of those relating to establishing baseline performance for this year, which is quite important that I said those measures are taken, but we haven't got anything to compare to yet. Next year we'll be able to compare back to this year. All scrutiny committees have reviewed the Q2 performance reports, and that was, you know, between sort of beginning and middle of December last year. And if you have a look at paragraph 2.16 to 2.22, that gives the outcomes, and all scrutiny committees have noted the performance results and progress to date in relation to the annual delivery plan 2022-23. And I think that with the discussion and I know that many of us attended those scrutiny discussions as well in terms of the annual delivery plan. So I won't go into them in greater depth unless any cabinet member wants to raise anything specific. The recommendations before us are that Cabinet considers performance results and progress towards achieving the annual delivery plan 2022-23 commitments as aligned to our corporate plan wellbeing objectives within the remit of the committee, as presented in the report and appendices. And 2, that Cabinet considers the views and recommendations of scrutiny committees in relation to Q2 performance and any additional actions required to tackle the key challenges. And I'll move.
And I'll second that as well, Leader.
Thank you, Bronwyn. And I see Gwyn's got his thumb up as well. Excellent. So yes, comprehensive report. I'm sure we'll be getting the next one before long. And you're going to get a break from me for a while. And the next report is for the Cabinet Member for Education, Arts and the Welsh Language, and that's the draft Transgender Inclusion Toolkit and Guidance Document for Schools and Other Settings. So over to you, Rhiannon.
Thank you. Right, to offer some background on this, the Transgender Inclusion Toolkit and Guidance Document for Schools and Other Settings was first adopted by the Vale Council in 2018. The background to that followed a number of requests going back some years from Vale of Glamorgan schools asking for additional advice and guidance. So the document was developed in response on behalf of the 5 Central South Consortium local authorities, and the Welsh Government were keen for local authorities in Wales to adopt the toolkit. And it has been adopted, but in some cases it's also been withdrawn. Obviously, times and case law have moved on, so it's more important than ever to ensure that appropriate advice is given to schools, to ensure that the duties owed by the local authority are met in respect of all people with a protected characteristic, and to take account of these developments. Because the Council provides guidance to schools on a range of issues, such as anti-bullying, safeguarding, physical restraint, isolation, etc. The Transgender Toolkit and Guidance will form a part of a suite of recommendations and documentation. The updated guidance to schools, which will be informed by the outcome of the consultation, will assist schools in taking a balanced and legally informed approach in meeting the duties owed to all pupils with protected characteristics. Trans inclusion is one part of a much wider equality agenda for schools, not to be seen in isolation. Our review and subsequent implementation of it will be informed by the guidance and advancement of the Welsh Government review, which is taking place at the moment. Ours will probably be in place before theirs is. I think that one of the most important parts of this is that we carry out a comprehensive and wide-ranging consultation process, because there are many groups that will be affected by this or will have opinions on this, and we need to be seen to be taking into account all the different viewpoints that may come forward during this consultation. If you look at item 2.6, there is a comprehensive list of consultees, including church groups, counsellors who will be consulted on more than one occasion, and school LGBTQ+ groups, all of whom will have viewpoints and points to offer to us. This illustrates the collaborative approach that's being adopted to finalising the draft toolkit. And this is in line with the ambitions the Council has set out in its public participation strategy. and a range of methods will be used during the consultation in order to capture the feedback. There'll be a survey on the new participation Veil platform, also a mechanism to enable a response for those without access to the internet. Views of elected members will be sought both in the Education Committee, Lifelong Learning, which is on February the 9th, and Corporate Performance and Resources, which is on February the 15th. And obviously councillors are also able to offer their responses written or otherwise at any point in the proceedings. Other key stakeholders will be offered the chance to make written representations. During the period of the consultation, the current toolkit will be removed from the public domain. However, the council and colleagues in learning and skills in particular continue to owe a statutory duty to all people with protected characteristics, and they will continue to support and advise our schools to ensure these duties are met on the interim. And this will be done possibly on a one-to-one basis if necessary. So what I would like us to look at now, please, are the recommendations. The Cabinet considers this report, this draft revised Vale of Glamorgan Transgender Inclusion Toolkit and guidance document for schools and other settings, and the Equality Impact Assessment, all of which contained in the appendices. The Cabinet authorises the Director of Learning and Skills to undertake a consultation from the 23rd of January to the 10th of March of this year on this revised Transgender Inclusion Toolkit. The Cabinet refers this report to the Learning and Culture Scrutiny Committee and the Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee for consideration as part of this proposed consultation exercise. The Cabinet receives a further report upon the conclusion and evaluation of the consultation exercise and updates to the toolkit and/or guidance. And that the use of paragraph 15.14.22 of the Council's Constitution Urgent Decision Procedure be authorised to allow this consultation to begin on the 23rd of January 2023, in other words, Monday. Are people happy with those recommendations, please?
I'm delighted. Okay. I'm delighted to second that. Ruby, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I'm sorry, am I very loud? I've got some feedback. Sorry, I apologise. I'm delighted that we're consulting on this, and you know, we are using all methods of consultation that we can. So I do hope as many people take part in this as possible. You know, this is a discussion that's often caused more heat than light from all sides. So I hope we can have a proper discussion on this. And I think I would just reiterate what Rhiannon, you've already said, that, you know, as a council, as you know, as individuals, we are committed to equality, and we will endeavour to, you know, follow the law, the Equalities Act, and protect all those with protected characteristics and beyond, because that's why we came into politics, and that's what we will continue to do. Thank you.
Super. That's passed. Ruby, you've still got your hand up. I'm assuming you didn't want to come back in. That's okay. And then we will move on to, we've got a number of reports from Mark as Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood and Building Services. So the first one, agenda item 16, is an objection report for Dryden Road in relation to a proposed traffic calming measures and one-way traffic regulation order. There you are, Mark.
Thank you very much, Leader, for that introduction. Okay, now this report is concerning Dryden Road. Okay, the council was awarded funding through the Welsh Government Active Travel Corps Allocation Fund to commence an active community-led street design project around Fairfield School. The scheme would encourage and facilitate active travel to and from the school. The project would see the first school-timed street closure, and it's the first one in the Vale of Glamorgan, by implementing a one-way system, installing traffic calming measures with school staff managing the time closure. The scheme will provide a traffic-free, safe environment for pupils to access and exit school premises. That premises for one-way system traffic calming measures were part of a statutory consultation period between the 20th of October to 11th of November. During that period, we had one formal objection. We also had one objection outside the time limit, which we allowed to be looked at as well. As part of the consultation process on this, there were over 800 letters sent within the catchment area of the school. And as a result, as I said, there was one formal objection in the time limit. The objector raised 3 concerns. The first concern was that the objector would find it difficult to get out of his driveway. The officers responded was that the remodelling, he would have adequate manoeuvrability to reverse safely into the driveway as required by the Highway Code. The second concern was that there should be a practice one. And in fact, there was a practice one, but it was an informal one with school children. The officer's response was that the road closure was not intended as a practice one for the school closure, and that residents and emergency vehicles will have access to the street during actual closure period. The third objection was concerning the one-way system. It was felt that, according to the data obtained by the traffic counter, is that most vehicles, in fact 80% of the vehicles, drive along Dryden Road in a southbound direction, and therefore there'd be a minimum inconvenience to road users. The other objection, as I said, was outside the catchment period. Concerns raised that it would cause bottlenecks and cause people to park across driveways, creating issues for residents and creating danger for children looking to cross the road. The officer stated that the road closure will restrict usage as stated, and this should reduce congestion and reduce the impact upon driveways. The second concern and third concerns were concerned about use of the driveway and the changes made. The officers felt that there would still be adequate manoeuvrability. The final concern was that the changes would not solve the problems such as parents driving on driveways. The officer responded that the one-way system would help and that appropriate controls would be implemented to safely manage the school's street closures, and full details of the procedures would be communicated to residents before implementation. It was also felt that the project would contribute to the Council Project Zero target of 2030 and encourage greater active travel by having a safer street. And what we want to do under this scheme is to encourage more people to walk to school in a safer way. And I think that is really important. And not only will that benefit in 2 ways, that will improve air quality within the area of the school and also reduce the amount of CO2. And that will hopefully fight in our small way the changing climate, isn't it? So I want to move that the Cabinet has considered these objections and has rejected the objections for the reasons stated above, and the proposed traffic calming measures and one-way system regulated will be implemented. So I'll move. Have I got anyone to second that? Thank you.
I'm happy to second, but actually I think Gwyn had his hand up first, so we'll put Gwyn up as seconding it. Super.
I also think Rhiannon wants to say something as well.
Yes, I've just spotted that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rhiannon, over to you.
You're muted.
I'd like to welcome the proposals. I think this is a really good idea. The school is within my ward, and if you drive along Wordsworth Avenue at pick-up and drop-off time, there are far too many cars behaving in dangerous ways. And because the roads are quite narrow there, I think that anything that encourages parents to walk children to school has got to be a laudable idea. So I'm very pleased that this is going forward.
Thank you very much.
Super. At this point, do I admit that I attended Fairfield and I used to walk to school? I was a model pupil, obviously, but yes, it's thoroughly enjoyed my days at Fairfield School, but they're to blame for what you see before you know. Moving on, we'll go to agenda item 17, and that's another objection report, and that's this time it's Roos Way Roos. So again, back to you, Mark.
Thank you very much. Okay, this is concerned with a proposal for prohibition of waiting and unloading at any time between Monday to Friday, 8 AM to 9:30 and 2:30 to 4 PM. And this concerns South Point Primary. As you know, South Point Primary is one of our eco schools. And and I know that many cabinet members, well, unfortunately, I haven't yet visited it. I'm dying to visit the school, and obviously this is, you know, part of this policy, part of this. Now, as part of this, there was a plan application for this school, and the proposal was this on terms of rating. So I'll just read out a few things. There were a couple of objections during the consultation period, and obviously we were required as Cabinet to consider those objections. The first objection concern was that car drivers will need to seek alternative locations where there are no payments. This, according to the objective, will make these locations, and I quote, more dangerous for the children and residents of the estate, as well as attending the school, as they need to walk along crowded non-payment roads, end of quotation. The officer's response was that the park restrictions at Rooseway are being specifically progressed as part of the planning condition, as I mentioned, associated with planning approval for the new school. Any consideration for additional parking will therefore need to be assessed separately, and any restrictions are only implemented when there is clear evidence of road safety issues or restricted traffic flow causing significant congestion. As a result of these objections, there were 2 site visits carried out on the 29th of June and the 5th of July last year, where one parked car was noticed on Green Meadow Way near its junction with Rooseway at the northeastern corner of the playground during a site visit. It was also noted that motorists were able to pass by the parked vehicle without difficulty, and no instance of obstructive parking were noted. Based on the above information, there is currently no evidence that the additional parking restrictions, would in fact cause any real issues. The council will continue to monitor any changes in parking conditions until the South Pike Primary is operating at full capacity, and obviously we'll have a look at that and we'll review it if we need to. The second concern is that it affects a large number of local residents, as they will not be able to park outside their houses or will need to move their vehicles. The office responded in that properties benefit from off-street parking, so they will not be affected by the proposed restrictions. The third concern was that there shouldn't be restrictions outside 57 to 59 Rooseway. However, the officer responded with stating Rule 243 of the Highway Code, and states that you must not stop or park within 10 metres of the junction. And removing this section of the proposed restriction would inappropriately encourage motorists to park at this location, contrary to the rules and guidance provided in the Highway Code. Now, obviously, there was a second objector in saying that parking was okay as it is. The officer responded that the parking restrictions being progress are future-proof, and that this progress as part of the planning agreement with parking restrictions as part of the formal planning condition, as I already mentioned. The second concern was that cars would be scattered across the estate, and then this could be a danger. The officer responded that on 2 site visits, as the ones I mentioned, there were no instances of obstructive parking were noted. It was also noted that if parking was going to be increased, then of course we look at possible mitigation to reduce the number of accidents. The third concern is that implementing were advisable to include the even side of Green Meadow Way. It was felt that this was not relevant as parking restrictions are concerned with South Point Primary. Further notes that these restrictions, will improve air quality within the area, and they are beneficial upon the climate by reducing the amount of nitrous oxide and carbon dioxide, which obviously will help us fight carbon change and go towards obviously Project Zero by 2030. And then that I move as the cabinet member that we reject the objections stated in the report and the restrictions as outlined be implemented, and so I move.
Thank you, Mark. Happy to agree that. Gwyn's got his hand up, so has Ruba, so that's super. Moving on to agenda item 18, that's disposal of land to the rear of 42 and 46 Fonmon Park Road, and that's another one for you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you very much, Leader. Yes, this report concerns the disposal of small packages of land at the back of 42 to 46 Fonmon Park Road. Now, the land itself is in fact very, very small, and it's not really suitable for any sort of development that the council could make, and therefore the view is that the land is surplus to requirements. And obviously we were asked by the landowners of 42-46 of whether they would like to acquire it. And of course, we've come back to say that, you know, subject to any concerns about the open space and obviously subject to legal, then of course we would be happy to do so. It would mean that they can extend their gardens, which would be good, and that would obviously contribute positively to against climate change, as you know, because it would be more green space for them, and obviously we'd like to move recommendations. Okay, I'd like to move the following recommendations on this. All right, then the number one, that subject to recommendations 2.5, the land identified at Appendix A to this report be declared surplus to the council requirements and a parcel sold to each of the adjacent property owners, namely registered proprietors of 42 and 46 Fonham Road, which is at market rent subject to covenants restricting future development on the land, being including the terms of sale. Number two, that authorities delegate to the monitoring officer, head of legal and democratic service, to advertise proposed loss of 2 small parcels of land of open space in accordance with section 1232A of the Local Government Act 1972, which are intended to be sold to adjoining properties. That the head of finance be authorised to appoint an external valuer to provide a market valuation report for land referred to in Appendix A, and agree heads to terms for the sale in conjunction with the heads of neighbourhood services and transport. Number four, that any objections to the public open space notice be referred back to Cabinet for consideration prior to any final decision on disposal. And number five, that if there are no objections to the public open space notice, the monitoring officer, head of legal and democratic, be authorised to complete all necessary legal documentation required to dispose of the land. And I so move. I think Councillor John wants to say something.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
as it shows on the map, Leader, it's a tiny space, and I would gladly support Councillor Wilson's recommendation.
Super. So you're seconding that. That's great, Gwyn. And I'm happy to support.
Maybe I'll give you a turn.
That would be good. My voice is starting to break up. So yeah, that's super. We've got support for that. And then we're on to two really important reports. Interestingly, I was only reading the other day, I think that as we're second highest recycler in Wales, that means we're one of the top recyclers in the world, because Wales is right high up there in terms of the world. So it's not all about cost cutting, although that's important. It's also about performance and what we deliver. So over to you, Mark, with the first of all, we're going to look at waste and recycling and waste management service changes 2023-24.
Thank you very much, Leader. Yeah, and I'm delighted to present this report to Cabinet this afternoon. I mean, you're quite right, Leader, when you're talking about us being the second highest, and I'm hoping with some of these changes, you never know, we may get to number one, but fingers crossed about that. But anyway, I will go into the detailed report now. This report identifies the need to make substantial savings to the waste management budget as a result of the unprecedented financial pressures on the council, and recommends we make a small subscription charge to deliver non-statutory waste services, which is named the Garden Waste Service. It also proposed that this be based on an annual subscription charge for fortnightly collections between March and November, and the use of ring request service for subscribers in December and February. And this would amount to worked out roughly about 25 pence per bag. And this includes obviously the processing and disposal of this waste as well, not just collection, but disposal of it as well. Additionally, it is proposed that black bags are collected every 3 weeks to reduce service costs, as well as possibly contribute to Project Zero by reducing our carbon footprint. This will not result in a reduction of black bags, and I want to emphasise that because there's been some rumours that it is. All right, we still will collect but in this time, 3 black bags every 3 weeks. So it's 3 and 3. I want to emphasize 3 and 3, not 1 and 3, but 3 and 3. So 3 black bags every 3 weeks. What I'm hoping, of course, is that people will look into their black bags to see what's in there, because we did a composition analysis still, and something like 15% of our black bags still contain food waste. And obviously food waste is an issue. As you know, the council collects food waste every week. And obviously, if people could please put the food waste in their green bags, so we can then compost it and process it ourselves. And that obviously helps tackling climate change. I think it's very important that people do realise that and encourage recycling. Also, that we propose a change in the frequency collections. And I already said that obviously we do it once every 3 weeks instead of once every 2 weeks. But we'll also still continue to offer support for larger families. As you know, some people already offer that support through our Purple Bag scheme. And, you know, but that is important. And also we have waste officers there to help people along so they know what they can and can't recycle. And I think that's important. I'll also urge people when they go shopping to think about the amount of packaging that they buy. And if they can buy loose things, it's better for the environment and it's better for everyone if they can do so. And probably they probably could save money by buying loose things as well, rather than things that are in packages. And I think that's important. Also think about the amount of products that you buy as well, so you don't waste products. I think that's important. The other thing I need to emphasize that if you've got a metal dustbin, then you can put your waste in that, and it will be, I've been assured by the head of waste management that it will be collected by our refuse collectors and put in the you know, in the vehicle. And I think that's important for people to understand that, because I know there's been some people have said about issues about storage of these, but if people can put them in the metal container, we could then take them and put them into the vehicle as well. Also, that obviously bearing in mind that we are making these changes, that obviously we changed the waste policy. The other point I also want to consider is that when we are doing these changes, and we plan to do those changes, obviously subject to consultation from April onwards, that we're going to include a few more items in the mix for recycling. And that's small electrical items, things like kettles, hair dryers, and also batteries will be collected at the curbside as well. We are also looking at the feasibility of textiles. But what we do want to make sure in that instance, that many people use charity shops. And we want to make sure that we do not compete with charity shops in terms of that if we are using that, they're more likely to be what we consider to be soiled textiles, or perhaps textiles which would not be ready for sale in those charity shops. So I like to emphasize that. Now, the other thing I also want to talk about, I just mentioned about black bags, is obviously green bags as well. Now, some of you are aware that subject to this cabinet report, and I know it's been widely looked at by the press and everybody, that there will be an introduction of charges. Now, the first thing I'd like to emphasize, that will be from 1st of July. It will not be immediately from April. And so therefore, you know, the charges will be reduced. So for 23-24, the charges will be £20 for the standard service, and I go into that in a moment, and the enhanced service will be £30. Now, for the standard service, it will mean that for £20 during that year, that you can have 4 green bags collected every fortnight. I like to emphasize that, 4 weeks. We also, the expectation would be that there will be a service of 72 hours. So please leave it around for 72 hours. The expectation is that it will be collected. And please notify your local councillor or myself if that doesn't happen. And obviously, one of the things we want to build in by doing this is building the resilience of this service. But for big users, though, of people who've got perhaps big gardens or need to do a lot of work, there will be an enhanced service, and that will be for a full year. That will work out £54 for up to 8 bags for collection. But for this current year, that would amount to £30. Now, we do have occasionally, sometimes, very heavy users of the Green Waste service. And I know that sometimes we've seen pictures of sometimes 100 bags outside people's houses that need to be collected. And that did cause quite a few issues last year due to the service. So obviously with that, there's going to be an extra charge. All right. And those extra charges will be an extra additional bag of 50p per occasion, and that will have to be booked online. So for example, if it's quite an extra 10 bags, and one of bank charge for that collection with £5 would apply. Now, obviously, you know, the reasons why we're doing this, obviously, are financial. We hope we have a take up of around 20% for this green service. At the moment, as you probably are aware, or you may be aware, that 40% of the population of the householders of Vale Glamorgan do not use this service. So there's a strong argument to say that why should 40% of Vale Glamorgan effectively subsidise the service used by the other 60% of the population? Now, obviously, we'd be aware that not everyone will want to take up this service, and there's nothing to stop anyone going to the household recycling centre at Atlantic Trading Estate or in Clondale and the trading estate there to get rid of their green waste that way for free. And we're not actually, it's not stopping that. And also, there's nothing stopping people who want to compost on their own as well. Equally. But we're hoping for a take up of around 20%. If we do, we realise savings of around £500,000 for this. For the savings for the black bags, as I mentioned, it will be £150,000. Now, obviously, we want to reduce the amount of black bags, hopefully, and hopefully that will happen. So hopefully it will nudge people to perhaps use recycling because it will be every week still. And to encourage that, and that will hopefully reduce the amount of CO2 and will make a positive contribution to Project Zero. Now, the other thing I want to talk about as well is obviously the employment implications for the council. May I want to emphasise to everybody, and I know we've got a lot of employees on the council as well. We are a major employer. I think we're the #1 employer within the Vale Glamorgan, that no permanent staff will be adversely affected by these changes. And because at the moment, as you may or may not know, the Green Waste Service is started by agency workers. And what we expect is that any sort of reduction in residual collections will mean that those people will now be redeployed to collect recycling. As you also want to emphasise that the Green Waste is a non-statutory service, and at present, as I mentioned before, and I like to emphasise that only 6% of residents use this service, and therefore it would seem unfair and inequitable for residents to subsidise such a service for current use. Okay, and I would like to then move to, I think we got Councillor John. Do you want to say something now before I move to recommendations?
Yes, Councillor Wilson, I fully support you. Absolutely, it's something that needs upgrading. I think it needs addressing, and I'm 100% behind you in these proposals.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move now to the recommendations, and thank you very much for that support. All right, number 1, that Cabinet approves in principle an annual subscription charge for collection of green waste on a frequency of once per fortnight between March and November. And I'd like to also emphasise that once you subscribe to this, basically on a winning request, there'd be a free service between after November. Okay, so that's important to emphasise. So once you subscribe to this service, you can then have it for free, basically, almost, because it's a winning request. And number 2, that Cabinet agrees in principle introduce a charge based on the above service from the 1st July 2023. That Cabinet agrees in principle the introduction of free weekly black bag collections based on 3 bags commencing the 1st July 2023. That Cabinet agrees in principle the residual waste policy updated to reflect the changes detailed in the report. And that Cabinet refers recommendations 1, 2, 3 and 4 above to Environment and Remediation Scrutiny for its consideration. With any views and recommendations referred back to Cabinet for consideration. And I urge people to do that. You know, the public of the Vale Glamorgan are entitled to be heard, and the best place for that to be hearing is obviously at scrutiny committees. And obviously, there's nothing to stop anyone emailing me, as some people have done so already. And I'm happy to explain the position of the Cabinet. And number 6, that the service charges in recommendation 1, 2, 3 be approved should no views to the contrary be expressed by Environment and Remediation Scrutiny Committee, and so move.
Thank you, Mark. I'm just thinking, Gwyn, seeing as you were so supportive, are you planning to second this? I thought so. And we're all in agreement.
Please to accept. Yeah.
Thank you, Gwyn. And then moving on to agenda item 20, we have the Recycling and Waste Management Strategy 2022 to 2032, so a 10-year strategy. And again, over to you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Leader. And obviously, we're looking at a report that is 10 years in ahead, not just now, but for the future. And I think it's very important that as a council, we're thinking of the future, not just now. Now, basically, a little background here. The council has adopted the Welsh Government's collections blueprint, which requires domestic recycling to be separated in preparation for curbside collection, and is at an advanced stage of rolling this service out across the Vale Glamorgan. This final stage of the rollout will include Penarth and surrounding areas. It's anticipated that this rollout will take place on 17th April after the resource recovery facilities for operational at Lantry Train Station. That's also known as the waste transfer station as well. I don't confuse people too much, but that's the other name for it. This will mean that the resource recycling facility that things will be sorted and put into bundles and be sold, and then possibly reused and remade into new products. That will include items such as paper, hard plastic, glass, cans and cardboard, and other things, like I mentioned, like electrical items and so on and so forth. This report seeks authority to approve the 10-year recycling waste management strategy. This is a key element in the council role in tackling target change via Project Zero, which is our plan, as you know, to make the council carbon zero, or carbon negative almost, hopefully negative, by 2030. This strategy has been subject to a 12-week public consultation and a management action plan. The report notes the intention to enhance the existing curbside recycling facility, added such items such as kettles and hairdryers, as I mentioned before in the previous report. The report also provides an update in respect to waste infrastructure, namely construction of resource recycling facility, as I mentioned, but also the reuse shop. So as I might have mentioned earlier on, when we looked at a previous report concerning emergency powers, that obviously we are at the moment constructing a reuse shop at Atlantic Trading Estate. And the great thing about this is that then when people have recycled items, drop them off at Atlantic Trading Estate, or drop them off perhaps at the curbside, that if they are of value, then we will sell them, and that money will then be back to help subsidise services provided by the Vale Glamorgan, and that's obviously a good thing. I know that other councils have done that, and I know that the chair at the time, Councillor Bronwyn Brooks, at the time, visited such a facility in Swansea, and I know you were very, very keen and enthusiastic about that. I know there's other facilities elsewhere now, and I'm really keen that we're doing it. I have visited that site myself. It's quite a big facility, and we're looking forward to seeing it operational in the spring. The other thing is obviously that we plan to move the parking of the fleet. At the moment, it's based at the Alps, which is some distance away from Barry and Central and the Eastern Vale, to that facility eventually. And obviously that will reduce the amount of fuel and carbon dioxide. And also the important bit is that we're still working on a replacement site at Clandale. Okay, we're still continuing to looking at that. And as you might have saw on the capital report, money's still been added allocated for that. In terms of savings to the environment, as I mentioned, by having the resource recovery facility or the waste transfer station, there'd be a saving of 23,445 litres of in terms of fuel use. And in terms of CO2, this will work out a carbon savings of 59 litres, which is quite a considerable saving. This will that we are still pursuing a relocation, as I mentioned, of Clandale, and then we continue to look for a site. And can I thank members of the public for contributing their comments to the waste strategy? It was very interesting reading it and to look for their view, to see their views as well. And I'm delighted that this will contribute, as I mentioned before, to Project Zero and eventually by net zero in 2050. So therefore, I'd like to move to the following recommendations. That Cabinet note the public consultation report Appendix A, which is attached to this, in relation to the draft recycling waste management strategy for 2022 to 2023. That Cabinet notes the management action plan contained within Appendix A, coordinated response to comments received, ensuring that these consider integrating the strategy, that the draft recycling and management strategy be amended to reflect Cabinet decision in relation to the waste service changes and savings report contained early in the agenda. Number 4, that Cabinet notes the progress on new and ongoing infrastructure, namely resource recovery facility, also known as the waste transfer station, the construction update, the new reuse shop, the proposed fleet park and replacement household waste recycling centre at Clandale. That number 5 refers this report to the Environment and Remediation Scrutiny Committee for their consideration. And number 6, that the draft recycling and waste management strategy be approved if there are no strategic amendments recommended by the Environment and Remediation Committee for Cabinet to consider. And I so move. I think I got Councillor Brooks. I'll say something.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I mean, it's just about the reuse shop. I said we went down. It was myself and Ruba went down as part of the committee to the one in Swansea. And I must admit, I initially went there thinking, oh, this will be really interesting. This will be good. And it was absolutely brilliant. I loved it there because it was not just about sort of the second-hand sort of goods that you can use for your upcycling and or whatever you want to do, different projects. But it was all about, there was lots of like collectible items as well. Then there was lots of repair items. There were some guys at the back who were sort of repairing sort of rebuilding televisions, laptops, hi-fi, to use an old-fashioned word, but all of that, and they had these, they literally, whatever they couldn't then repair, they just stripped down and used them for parts. I mean, there was so much going on there, and it was an absolutely fantastic facility, and I really can't wait for this one to come in and Barry. So great, well done.
Well, I look forward to rummaging through that shop myself. I'm always into second-hand products, as no doubt a few of you know that already. Can I thank you all? We got a seconder? Councillor John?
Yeah, I think Councillor John is seconding. If he didn't, I will. Do you know, I think I wasn't going to say we're all sad. I was going to say, actually, this is really exciting for all of us in terms of the engagement and the conversations that we've had in Cabinet. And as I said earlier, you know, we're second in Wales. Oh, how soon are we going to get to first? But more than that, I think most of us have seen those pictures of huge piles of plastic bags on distant coastlines, polluting their environment, and being determined not to be part of that issue. At the moment, everything that we collect, we know exactly where it goes. It's all traceable, and we want to do more as we expand. I think the only thing with trepidation is the thought of getting a sticker of doom on my recycling bag when separated recycling comes to Penarth. I'm sure my neighbours are waiting for it, but then my husband does the recycling, so I will point at him. But no, I think really exciting times, and you know, how soon can we get to zero waste? I don't know. It's a challenge, isn't it?
It is a
Thanks,
challenge.
Mark. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
bringing that report. Gwyn, did you want to speak?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that when the blueprint came to Lantred Major, because we were one of the first areas, the Western Vale, and the number of problems I had with people complaining about some of their plastic not being taken, because when you get for example, a packet of ham in plastic, the top piece of plastic you rip off to get to the food is not recyclable. It's only the hard piece underneath. So providing everybody follows the instructions that Colin will send out, it's an absolutely great facility. And everybody down my drive is organised. They know what they're doing, and we don't have a problem. And everybody around now, I don't get any problems anymore. It's a really good system. And I've been down the waste management site, and quite honestly, I'm looking forward to go down there when it's now complete, because we went down there up to our knees in mud. But nevertheless, I think it's absolutely great. We're leading the way in waste, you know, and I want to see us top of the tree, and
So do I.
Vale Glamorgan top of the tree. And I think it's down to our residents. There's so many residents on board with this. Let's all get on board. Let's make it a really top Vale.
Yeah, no, let's make us number one. You're quite right.
Yeah, thank you,
Councillor
Mark.
John. Thank you. And thank you all for your comments.
Super. Thanks, Mark. And then it's the report, Gender Item 21 is actually the report of the Cabinet Member for Public Sector Housing and Tenant Engagement. And as Margaret is indisposed, I'll take that report, and it's related to the Gypsy Traveller Accommodation Assessment. There's actually a legal requirement on us to undertake a Gypsy Traveller Accommodation Assessment in order to identify accommodation needs of the Gypsy Traveller community in our area. There's a prescribed way of doing it, and local authorities are then expected to make provision for resolving any unmet needs identified. The last time the Vale had a Gypsy Traveller Accommodation Assessment was actually in 2016, and a further assessment was scheduled for 2021, but in light of the COVID pandemic and restrictions on research, this timescale was extended to last year. The assessment was completed on the council's behalf by an independent research service, Opinion Research Services, and the work was overseen by a steering group which comprised council staff and representatives from partner agencies. And the assessment has actually identified a shortfall of 9 pitches going forward to 2026 and a further 2 pitches required by 2036. The needs made up from occupants of unauthorised developments, and that's namely Brocastle Quarry site and Twynerod in Wenvo, and a family currently in bricks and mortar accommodation, and a future additional pitch need for children at Brocastle Quarry who will become adults in the next 5 years and obviously require their own accommodation. In line with the definition in the Welsh Government methodology, the current travellers at the Hayes Road site have been excluded from the calculation of unmet need, and this is because we are unable to take planning enforcement action given that they've occupied the site for 10 years or more. However, it is recommended that letters are sent to travellers currently occupying this unauthorised site to advise that while we might not be able to take planning enforcement action against their residential use of the site, there can be no implied rights to claim adverse occupation. So, you know, there is no planning enforcement, but they cannot take that for granted that they can stay there. The assessment identified there's not currently a need for a transit site in the Vale, and in terms of making provision for unmet need, there are currently retrospective planning applications in respect of the Brocastle quarry site and also Twynarodin. If those applications are approved, the unmet need figure will reduce to 4, and there may be scope to accommodate extra plots at Brocastle quarry, but this would further offset the need. So that's a fairly straightforward report, and the recommendations that we've got today are that Cabinet approves the findings of the Gypsy and Traveller Accommodation Assessment 2022, which is attached to Appendix A with all the full details, that Cabinet refers the report and the Gypsy Traveller Accommodation Assessment to relevant scrutiny committees, I'm assuming that would be Homes and Safe Communities, for consideration, and agrees to submit the Gypsy Traveller Accommodation Assessment 2022 to Welsh Government. Finally, that subject to recommendation 2, Cabinet endorses the suggested approach that the Director of Place issues a letter to the travellers currently occupying the unauthorised site at Hayes Road, Sully, to inform them that whilst no planning enforcement action will be pursued in respect of their residential use of the site, there can be no implied rights to claim adverse occupation of the site. Fairly straightforward recommendations, and I would move.
And I'll second those, Leader.
Thank you. Are we all in agreement on that? Super. And then moving over, Ruba has a report. This is the Council's response to Welsh Government consultation, that's Electoral Administration and Reform White Paper, and that's official title, Cabinet Member for Community Engagement, Equalities and Regulatory Services. Over to you.
Thank you, Liz. This is a fairly straightforward report. This is our response to the Welsh Government's White Paper on the consultation for electoral administration and reform. I think it's worth sort of just reading out the executive summary of this report, because it really does cover the essence of what Welsh Government are trying to achieve with this White Paper, which is to involve more people in democracy. So it's for promoting engagement in elections, making standing for elections safer and more straightforward. It's about legislation to modernise the administration of elections, legislation to improve the conduct of electoral and community reviews for local government, and legislation to consolidate electoral law, and longer term propositions for electoral reform to support Welsh democracy in the future. So I think they're things that we would all broadly agree with and like to see come into force. There are, I think, without looking, you'll see in the appendix to this are answers to the questions put by this White Paper, and I think there are about 89 questions. And they're all quite straightforward, and our response is also in line with the Association for Election Administrators. So you know, we're sort of, our responses were very similar to theirs. There were no, you know, we're broadly, as I say, we're broadly in support of the 6 principles that this White Paper talks about, the 6 principles of electoral reform, which are equity, accessibility, participation, improving citizen experience, simplicity and integrity. We're broadly in favour of that. The only issues that we have raised are around, and I'm going to sound like a sci-fi novel now, the divergence, if you like, between what this reform is proposing, and of course the Electoral Act, which is already in law in the UK, and there are some, you know, that administratively there would be some difficulties. So we have highlighted those, and I could, for example, question 2, when we're considering electronic remote voting, for example. So the question is, should the Welsh Government commit resource to considering how electronic remote voting could operate for devolved elections? Well, of course, that would be a great idea, but that's not part of the Electoral Act in the UK. So there would be a divergence, and that would cause some difficulties. For example, if we had elections that were coinciding, so a UK election coinciding with a local election, for example, so that may cause difficulties. So we have highlighted that in our response, but as I say, broadly we are in favour of making participating in elections and standing for election easier. So the recommendations, Liz, are very straightforward. First, that the proposed response, which you see before you and attached at Appendix A, is submitted to Welsh Government, and that the use of paragraph 15.14.2 of the Council's Constitution, that i.e. the urgent decision procedure, be authorised to allow the response to be sent to Welsh Government by the extended deadline of the 23rd of January. The original deadline was the 10th of January, and we asked for a small extension, which was granted, which is why we're asking for the urgent decision procedure to be invoked. So I'd move those recommendations, please.
Thank you, Ruba. It's really interesting, actually, this sort of ideas about bringing elections and voting, etc., into the 21st century. A lot of us do it for various other areas, and it'd be nice if we could bring it forward. I would be very happy to second this, but I think that we have 2 other people who'd like to come in. So Rhiannon, I think you're first.
Thank you. I welcome this report. I think that anything that makes voting easier for everybody has to be applauded and welcomed. And I think anything that makes it easier for people to come forward and stand for election. I mean, we are a variety of people here today, but not all councils are as gender balanced as we are, for example. Some councils are entirely white. Certainly some councils are predominantly middle class, and I think that we need as wide a variety as possible of people possibly to represent the wide variety of people who are our constituents. And I think that anything that moves us towards that has to be applauded. So I'm very pleased to support this report.
Thank you.
And then Mark, you've also got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you very much, Leader. And thank you very much, Ruba, for that presentation. I mean, I think it's really good to have all these different ideas about changing the electoral system. I always thought, since standing first time way back in 1998, that the system has always needed to be reformed. And I remember seeing those documents, I think they were mostly pink documents. I thought this is something out of Charles Dickens' period. And I thought, if there's a way to put off people from standing, that is it. And I'm really glad that we did make some changes in the last election to make it easier for people to stand, because that smooths the process. I would hasten to add, though, that for many people, it still seems a difficult learning curve, especially for those people who don't have a backing of a political party. It's much harder for independent members, I feel, to stand in some ways than if you're backing of a party process, and also you've got comrades and colleagues that have done the process before and can help you along. And also, I like to emphasise, there's not much mentioned here about the World Agents. They are also very important because they really help you in your do's and don'ts of standing for election. But the other point I also like to make a comment on is obviously about when people do vote, we've got to make it easier for them to vote. Okay, we want to make those places to vote attractive, full of lighting so that people can see where they can vote, and we want to make it accessible as possible. And I think that is crucial. I still feel, in terms of electoral and people registered to vote, we should make it as easy as possible. And I do have major concerns, and I know this may be slightly off what we're talking about, of having, ID for people to vote, because we don't want to put people off. Stanley, we don't have a compulsory ID system in the United Kingdom. We're not required to do that, and why should we do so? There's no real evidence of any large-scale electoral fraud going on in this country, and we still want more people to vote, and we should make it as easy as possible. So in some ways, I do welcome this idea of a database, but as we know, we need good security when it comes to that, and we also need to make sure that there is no abuse from it. So we've got to be careful here, so I do welcome this consultation, but I'd be interested in more detail coming forward. So thank you.
I mean, on that point, on the ID, I mean, obviously, that law's been passed now, so kind of UK wide. But actually, I should just mention, because you raised it, that we are sending out information for people from now on about those changes, so that people will be aware of them. Thank you.
Thank you. And interesting report. So agenda item 23 is any items which the chair has decided are urgent. I have no urgent items, you'll be pleased to know. However, agenda item 24, I do have a part 2 item, and so for that we will need to move into private session. So first of all, I'll have to, oh sorry Debbie.
Thank you, Leader. Before we move into part 2, I've received an email from one of my hawk-eyed colleagues with regards to agenda item 18, that in the heading and the agenda item, it refers to Fonmon Park Road, but within the body of the report, except for on one occasion, it refers to Fonmon Road. And I'm being advised that it should be Fonmon Road, not Fonmon Park Road. But what I'd just ask Cabinet, if you could give me an additional delegation under that item, so that I can clarify the point in consultation with Director of Environment and Housing and the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood and Building Services, so that we are dealing with the correct parcel of land. So just an additional delegation, and then we can
Super.
address that. Thank you.
Well, thank you to your eagle-eyed colleague, and I'm very happy to make that recommendation. And I'm assuming that Mark, do you want to second?
Yeah.
I'm more than happy. Sorry, as Cabinet Member, I'm more than happy to second that.
Excellent, and I could see everybody nodding. So yes, thank you, Debbie. That is done. So yes, now we need to move into part 2 for a confidential item. So I will ask the Cabinet Officer if he can stop the live streaming and the recording and let me know when that is. Could I have